And I'm at that hour. So, actually, this is the wrong screen, I suppose, because first things first, we've got business to take care of today. We should be over here. Because Abbe has once again managed to prove themselves the most loyal and prepared person by being the first one here. So, we make a little mark. Oh, hang on. There we are. Yeah. You've officially broken into the new rules. So yeah, thank you for showing up ahead of time, as always, Abby. I genuinely appreciate it. Yeah, that's taken care of. No other particular shout-outs to give since last stream. So, what are we doing then? Ooh, other than maybe struggling a bit. There seems to be some issues with the wards at the minute, so things might be a bit weird today. We'll try and keep on top of it, but sometimes stuff just happens, you know. Yeah, okay. I think the music is cut. Yeah, there it is. Okay, no idea why that happened, but yeah, it should be back now. Right. So what are we doing? I really got to get like a little established thing for this. I was relying too heavily on that. I don't know if anyone's there bit because now I just don't have like a pre-prepared little speech. I should get one of them. I'll work on it. But for the day, now that we're finished with Alphic, I'm going to do. I'm not going to jump into another long one immediately because tomorrow I am going to be over with SkitterSkreetch on her channel, talking a little bit about Magic the Gathering. Which I'm not going to stream over here, so it will just be over there. But I'm probably not going to want to do a very long stream that day if I stream at all. So I don't want to break into another long book that I'll have to do cross streams and then skip parts of it, because I think I like doing them all like one day after the other. So going to hold off until Friday for 1 AM. So today we're going back to some short stories. Got a little bit of Melville, which I'm not sure how long it will take. Probably not more than an hour and a half, maybe. And then if I do anything tomorrow, it will probably be more ghost stories. But just to give you an idea what's happening. Having said that, now I've got to do my normal time filler thing. I believe I was telling you about the library. And the last thing I think I told you was down to level 30, which was the levels of the library where they have the sort of standard books of sort of education for mages. Now to tell you about the deeper levels of the actual archive, things get a little bit complicated because they ain't exactly well sectioned out. I think I mentioned a couple of times that sometimes things move around in the library, and mostly that is the lower levels which move around. And this little section is in those lower levels, which is why sometimes like stuff that would otherwise be like standard seems to have moved around for me, because I also move around with it. But the best way to understand the deeper levels isn't really as individual levels, though in theory there are 23 of them. It's to sort of think of it as an ecosystem, maybe, an ecology. The nature of any sort of powerful books of magic is that they fundamentally become magical objects. Right, like you have enough symbols in them, that they sort of gain charge, gain importance, gain lamp causing significance, and they become objects of magic. And apparently, in order to like avoid those sort of symbols just sort of blowing up, you sort of have to write them in a specific way where they sort of flow together in like a deliberate effect. And so every sort of book, I'd say probably more or less every book past sort of floor 30 is to some degree or another alive. That's not to say that they're all like flapping around and moving and screaming and stuff. Like there's a lot of fairly mundane texts that are sort of just made more by the presence of other ones, but all the magical books sort of change the old place. So it becomes less like an archive and more like sort of a wilderness, like a shifting thing. And it's not just that the books is alive, but the nature of these books, because of the energy they hold, they need to be sort of maintained isn't the right word. I mean, books need to be maintained just in general, but they need to be balanced. Like the energy they have is oftentimes inimical to other books that are there, so they'll clash or they'll not work right, or if they're aligned with a specific sort of magic, they'll need certain like environments or changeable things that will kind of how'd you put it? Like they well, they need to move essentially. Like you can't have them be static in one place, both because it's bad for the books themselves and because the books will change the environment around them. Now they do that anyway, but like if you have them entirely static in space, then it becomes worse and worse until they essentially become unusable as a library. So a big chunk of the actual like magic that goes into the archive itself, the place, is dedicated to moving these things around in order to keep them balanced. And that tells me that back in the day, this was sort of an understood quantity. Like it was managed directly by, you know, wizards who would like know where things were, and there would be maps that would be updated, and you'd know where it was. But the wards is very old and it's very damaged, and they're on backup redundancies at this point. So there are essentially sensors that just like scatter throughout this place that sense when something is wrong and then move it to where it would be right, and no one knows when or how this works really. So instead of being like, you know, a series of rooms and sort of hallways and, you know, breathing rooms and all that, you have what is essentially an ever-changing sort of maze. Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. Like a shuffling labyrinth, basically. And it is filled with all these strange sort of things that come from the books. And I don't just mean the beasts. There's a lot of beasts in this part of the library. Like they get stuck here because it changes on them. But the books themselves is sort of the most notable thing. So I said they're all magical, but not all of them move about. But a lot of them do move about. And what's more, even the ones that is not entirely books anymore still move about. Like when you have a book that is like that, it is so magical that it becomes a creature more than an object, and then it's damaged. It being damaged doesn't hurt it in the same way it would hurt like a living creature out of flesh and blood. It just makes it different, right? Like the form isn't what makes it magical, it's the content. So if you have the binding get damaged, which is what happens a lot of the time, because a lot of the pages are spelled to be protected, but the binding is just, you know, meant to be protective in and of itself. If that gets damaged and the pages fall loose, then they sort of spread out, and they act weird. Like the way they act depends on what they have written on them. And so some of them will like plaster on the wall and start growing like plants, or they'll, you know, begin moving in these patterns or forming these circles on the floor and becoming natural magical rituals. But most of them sort of become, I call them panes, which are like, they fold themselves into little origami cranes. It's not always cranes, but it's mostly cranes. But little origami creatures that can, well, most of them can fly. Some of them are like land-bound. And they're sort of everywhere in the, sort of in this sort of changing labyrinth, these lower floors of the archive. Like if you were to have like an ecosystem, they'd be like rabbits or birds, right? They sort of feed the creature. That's the way I sort of imagine them. Although I don't think anything eats them. Maybe something does. There are probably millions of them just scattered about. And it can be a bit unpredictable because most of them's pretty harmless, although they will bash into you if you get near them. Because, well, my leading theory is because all wizards is dicks to a certain extent, and magic just makes you a brick. But some of them are a bit different. Some of them is dangerous. Like, you can see here, I'm facing this way because you can see this sort of scar on my stomach here, if you look close. That comes from one of these panes. It was just normal, like seemingly normal paper crane sort of sitting in a place. I needed to get by, so I scrooged past it. But this one had some sort of cutting spell on it. So as I go to brush past it, its wing digs into my stomach. Good, gotta be, what, half, 3/4 of an inch, and just slashes right out. Like nothing, like no resistance. And suddenly I'm bleeding out and my intestines as well. So like that's what it's like with dealing with the pains. They are very unpredictable. But they're not all negative, because the reason that I didn't die from that is also because of these pains. So for example, a lot. Like, there's not a lot of healing spells. Like magic can do just about anything, but healing is complicated and difficult. So there's not actually a lot of them about. But there are a number of them. And Lamp has sort of shown me over the years how to identify those ones. Kinda, like, it's not perfect. I have to bring them in to double check them. But one of the things I tend to do when I'm out and about in the library is if I see one of these, I'll grab it. And if Lamp says it's a good one, I'll throw it in. We've got a little like storage closet that we keep it in. And so if I get hurt, I will just make my way back there. And they'll sort of spawn all around me wherever I'm at and sort of peck away at the wound until it just goes away and stops being. It's weird and unsettling. It feels very strange, but it's kept me alive. Just a second. Those guys. But yeah. So that's the pains. The healing one's mostly good. Although you do got to be careful. Like I mentioned, Lamp's got to check them. He made me take them to him first, and obviously I don't love doing that. So at some point I sort of got the idea in my head that I was, you know, I knew what I was doing and I didn't. And you can see this other scar sort of in the middle of my body here, with the like missing patch of fur. And I got a small cut there, just off of like a splinter or something. I don't really remember. And I thought, yeah, I see. I've got a healing crate in my bag. I know what they're like. I know this is a good healing one. I'll have it. And that one grew a new arm out of the little space, which I then had to get cut off. So that's why you're careful with them. Yeah. Music's dying. And I'm dropping frames. This is not good. Oh dear. Does not look like a well-fated stream tonight, but we'll press on. Yeah, so that's the pains, and that's the sort of lowest acts of the library. There's the beasts as well, but I'll get into them more in the sort of next floors because that's the lamps they come from. That's 13 minutes, which is more than 10 minutes, so that should be enough getting on to be getting on with. If anyone who's going to be here should be here. So that being the case, I'm gonna go over to the book and we'll get started. Yeah. Right, so the book we got tonight is The Paradise of Bachelors, The Tartarus of Maids by Herman Melville. I said, I don't really know what I'm going into in this one, so we'll see how we get on. As always, if you missed something that I've said, and you need me to go back over something, or you want me to repeat something, let me know, and I'm happy to do that. Yeah, if you also have just comments or something to say, or you want to have a chat, let me know. I'm always happy to have a word. I don't know exactly how long this is. Let's have a look. It shouldn't be too long. Yes. Okay, so this is looking to be about 20 pages, which for Melville is a bit dense, so it'll probably be about an hour or so. But it's in two parts, namely the Paradise of Bachelors and the Tartarus of Maids, so I'll probably do a little bit of commentary after each part. And yeah, unless anyone has anything else to say, I'll have a quick drink first, just to wet my throat. And then, without any further ado, I shall begin. Well, as I should say, unless anyone has anything else to say, but I don't think anyone does. Feel free to let me know if I'm wrong. It lies not far from Temple Bar. Going to it by the usual way is like stealing from an heated plain into some cool, deep glen, shady among arbouring hills. Sick with the dark din and soiled with the mud of Fleet Street, where the Benedict tradesmen are hurrying by, with ledger lines ruled along their brow, thinking upon rise of bread and fall of babies, you adroitly turn a mystic corner, not a street, glide down a dim monastic way, flanked by dark, sedate and solemn paths, and still wending on, give the old careworn world a slip, and, disentangled, stand beneath the quiet cloisters of the paradise of bachelors. Sweet are the oases in Sahara, charming the isle groves of August prairies, delectable pure faith amid 1,000 perfidies, but sweeter still more charming, most delectable, the dreamy paradise of bachelors, found in the stony art of stunning London. In mild meditation pace the cloisters, take your pleasure, sip your leisure in the garden waterwoods. Go linger in the ancient library, go worship in the sculptured chapel. But little have you seen, just nothing do you know, not the sweet kernel have you tasted, till you dine among the bandied bachelors, and see their convivial eyes and glasses sparkle. Not dine in bustling commons during term time in the hall, but tranquilly, by private inn, at a private table, some fine Templar's hospitality or hospitably invited guest. Templar? That's a romantic name. Let me see. Brian de Bois Gilbert were a Templar, I believe. Do we understand you to insinuate that those famous Templars still survive in modern London? May the ring of their armed heels be heard, and the rattle of their shields, as in male prayer the monk knights kneel before the consecrated host. Surely a monk knight were a curious sight, picking his way along the Strand, his gleaming corselet and snowy surcoat spattered by an omnibus. Long bearded too, according to his orders rule, his face fuzzy as a pard's. How would the grim ghost look among the crop-haired, close-shaven citizens? We know indeed, sad history recounts it, that a moral blight tainted at last this sacred brotherhood. Though no sordid foe might outskill them in the fence, yet the worm of luxury crawled beneath their guard, gnawing on the core of nightly trough, nibbling the monastic vow, till at last the monk's austerity relaxed to wassailing, and the sworn knights bachelors grew to be, but hypocrites and rakes. But for all this, quite unprepared were we to learn that the Knights Templar, if at all in being, was so entirely secularized as to be reduced from carving out immortal fame in glorious battling for the Holy Land, to the carving of roast mutton at a dinner board. Like Anacreon do these degenerate Templars now think it sweeter, far do fall in banquet than in war. Or indeed, how can there be any survival of that famous order? Templars in modern London, Templars in their Red Cross mantles, smoking cigars at the divan. Templars crowded in a railway train till, stacked with steel helmet, spear and shield, the old train looks like one elongated locomotive. No, the genuine Templar has long since departed. Go view the wondrous tombs in the Temple Church. See there the rigidly haughty forms stretched out, or crossed arms upon their stilly arts, in everlasting and undreaming rest. Like the years before the flood, the bold Templar knights are no more. Nevertheless, the name remains, and the nominal society, and the ancient grounds, and some of the ancient edifices. But the iron eel is changed to a boot as painted leather, the long two-handed sword to a one-handed quill. The monk giver of gratuitous ghostly counsel now counsels for a fee. The defender of the sarcophagus, if in good practice with his weapon, now has more than one case to defend. The vowed opener and clearer of all our ways leading to the holy sepulchre, now has it in particular charge to check, to clog, to hinder and embarrass all the courts and avenues of law. The knight combatant of the Saracen, breast and spear points at Acre, now fights law points at in Westminster Hall. The helmet is a wig, struck by time's enchanter's wand. The Templar is today a lawyer. But like many other tumbled from a proud glory's eye, like the apple hard on the bough but mellow on the ground, the Templar's fall has but made him all the finer fellow. I dare say those old warrior priests were gruff and grouty at the best. Cased in Birmingham hardware, how could the crimped arms give yours or mine an hearty shake? Their proud ambitious monkish shoulders clasped shut like hornbook missiles, their very face clapped in bombshells. What sort of genial man were these? But best of comrades, most affable of hosts, capital diner is the modern Templar. His wit and wine are both the sparkling brands. The church and cloister, courts and vaults, lanes and passages, banquet halls, refectories, libraries, terraces, gardens, broad walks, domiciles and dessert rooms, covering a very large space of ground, and all ground grouped in a central neighbourhood and quite sequestered from the old city surrounding din, and everything about the place being kept in most bachelor-like particularity. No part of London offers to a quiet white so agreeable a refuge. The Temple is indeed a city by itself, a city with all the best appurtenances, as the above enumeration shows. A city with a park to it, flower beds and a riverside, the Thames flowing by as openly in one part as by Eden's primal garden flowed the mild Euphrates. In what is now the Temple Garden, the old Crusaders used to exercise their steel and lances. The modern Templars now lounge on the benches beneath the trees. And, switching their patent leather boots in gay discourse, exercise at repartee. Long lines of stately portraits in the banquet halls show what great men are marked, famous nobles, judges, and Lord Chancellors have in their time been Templars. But all Templars are not known with universal fame, though if they have in warm hearts and warmer welcomes, full minds and fuller cellars, and given good advice and glorious dinners spiced with rare divertissements of fun and fancy merry and more, immortal mention, set down, ye muses, the name of RFC and his imperial brother. Though to be a Templar, in the one true sense, you must needs be a lawyer or a student of the law, and be ceremoniously enrolled as a member of the order. Yet many such, though Templars, do not reside within the Templar's precincts, though they may have their offices there. Just so, on the other hand, there are many residents of the hoary old domiciles who are not admitted Templars. If being, say, a lounging gentleman and a bachelor, or a quiet unmarried literary man, charmed with the soft seclusion of the spot, you much desire to pitch your shady tent among the rest in this serene encampment, then you must make some special friend among the order, and procure him to rent, in his name but at your charge, whatever vacant chamber you may find to suit. Thus, I suppose, did Dr. Johnson, that nominal bendick and widower but virtual bachelor, when for a space he resided here. So too did that undoubted bachelor and rare good soul, Charles Lamb, and hundreds more of sterling spirits, brethren of the order of celibacy, from time to time have dined and slept and tabernacled here. Indeed, the place is all honeycombed of offices and domiciles. Like any cheese, it is quite perforated through, and through it all, in all directions, with the snug cells of bachelors. Dear delightful spot! Ah, when I bethink me of those sweet hours there passed, enjoying such genial hospitalities beneath those time-honoured roofs, my heart only finds due utterance through poetry, and with a sigh I softly sing, carry me back to old Virginia. Such then at large is the paradise of bachelors, and such I found it one pleasant afternoon in the smiling month of May, when, sallying from my hotel in Trafalgar Square, I went to keep my dinner appointment with that fine barrister, bachelor and bencher, RFC. He is the first and second, and shouldn't be the third. I hereby nominate him. Sorry. He is the first and second, and should be the third. I hereby nominate him. His card I kept fast pinched between my gloved forefinger and thumb, and every now and then snatched still another look at the pleasant address inscribed beneath the name. Number redacted, Elm Court, Temple. At the core we were a right bluff, carefree, right comfortable and most companionable Englishman. If on first acquaintance he seemed reserved, quite icy in his air, patience, this champagne will fall, and if it ne'er do, better frozen champagne than liquid vinegar. There was 9 gentlemen, all bachelors at the dinner. One were from number redacted, King's Bench Walk, Temple, a second, third and fourth, and fifth, from various courts or passages, christened with some similarly rich resounding syllables. It were indeed a sort of senate of the bachelors, sent to this dinner from widely scattered districts to represent the general celibacy of the Temple. Nay, it was, by representation, a grand parliament of the best bachelors in universal London. Several of those present, being from distant quarters of the town, noted immemorial seats of lawyers and unmarried men. Lincoln's Inn, Furnival Inn, and one gentleman, upon whom I looked with a sort of collateral awe, hailed from the spot where Lord Verulam once abode a bachelor, Gray's Inn. The apartment were well up towards heaven. I know not how many strange old stairs I climbed to get to it, but a good dinner with famous company should be well earned. No doubt our host had his dining room so high with a view to secure the prior exercise necessary to the due refreshing and digestion of it. The furniture were wonderfully unpresenting, old and snug. No new shining mahogany, sticky with undried varnish. No uncomfortably luxurious ottomans and sofas too fine to use vexed you in this sedate apartment. It is a thing which every sensible American should learn from every sensible Englishman. That glare and glitter, gimcracks and gewgaws are not indispensable to domestic solacement. The American Benedict snatches, downtown, a tough chop and a gilded showbox. The English bachelor leisurely dines at home on that incomparable South Down of his, of a plain deal board. The ceiling of the room were low. Who wants to dine under the dome of St. Peter's? Our ceilings. If that is your demand, and the higher the better, and you be so very tall, then go dinner with the topping giraffe in the open air. In good time the 9 gentlemen sat down the 9 covers, and soon were fairly under way. If I remember right, oxtail soup inaugurated the affair. Of a rich russet hue, its agreeable flavour dissipated my first confounding of its main ingredient with Teamsters' grads and the rural rides of ushers. By way of interlude, we here drank a little claret. Neptune's was the next tribute rendered, turbot coming second, snow white, flaky, and just gelatinous enough, not too turtleish in its unctuousness. At this point we refreshed ourselves with a glass of sherry. After these light skirmishes had vanished, the heavy artillery of the feast marched in, led by that well-known English generalissimo, roast beef. For aides de camp we had a saddle of mutton, a fat turkey, a chicken pie, and endless other savoury things, while for avant-courriers came 9 silver flagons of ale. This heavy ordnance having departed on the track of the light skirmishers, a pickled brigade of game fowl encamped upon the board, their campfires lit by the ruddiest of decanters. Tarts and puddings followed, with innumerable niceties, and cheese and crackers, by way of ceremony simply, only to keep up good fashions. We here each drank a glass of good old port. The cloth were now removed, and, like Blucher's army coming in at the death of the field of Waterloo, in marched a fresh detachment of bottles, dusty with their hurried march. All these manoeuvrings of the forces were superintended by a surpassing old field marshal, I cannot school myself to call him by the inglorious name of waiter, with snowy hair and napkin, and an head like Socrates. Amid all that hilarity of the feast, intent of important business, he disdained to smile. Venerable man, I have above endeavoured to give some slight schedule of this general plan of operations. But anyone knows that a good, genial dinner is a sort of pell-mell, indiscriminate affair, quite baffling to detail in all particulars. Thus I spoke of taking a glass of claret, and a glass of sherry, and a glass of port, and a mug of ale, all at certain specific periods and times. But those were merely the state bumpers, so to speak. Innumerable impromptu glasses were drained between the periods of those grand imposing months. The 9 bachelors seemed to have the most tender concern for each other's health. All the time, in flowing wine, they most earnestly expressed their sincerest wishes for the entire well-being and lasting hygiene of the gentleman on the right and on the left. I noticed that one of these kind bachelors desired a little more wine, just for his stomach's sake, like Timothy. He would not help himself to it unless some other bachelor would join him. It seemed held something indelicate, selfish, and unfraternal to be seen taking a lonely, unparticipated glass. Meantime, as the wine ran apace, the spirits of the company grew more and more to perfect genialness and unconstrained. They related all sorts of pleasant stories.
Oh, the rat!
Hiya, Blake, how you doing? Good to see you. Where are we doing? We're in the middle of the Paradise of Bachelors, which is basically just an account of a particular suburb of the City of London, and we're right in the middle of an accounting of a fine dinner had by Mr. Melville among pleasant company. They related all sorts of pleasant stories. Choice experiences in their private lives were now brought out, like choice brands of Moselle or Rhenish, only kept for particular company. One told us how mellowly he lived when a student at Oxford, with various spicy anecdotes and most frank-hearted noble lords, his liberal companions. Another bachelor, a grey-headed man with a sunny face who, by his own account, embraced every opportunity at leisure to cross over into Low Countries on sudden tours of inspection of the fine old Flemish architecture there. Hey Blake, this learned white-haired, sunny-faced old bachelor excelled in his descriptions of the elaborate splendours of those old guild halls, town halls, and state old houses to be seen in the land of the ancient Flemings. A third was a great frequenter of the British Museum, and knew all about scores of wonderful antiquities, of oriental manuscripts and costly books without duplicate. A fourth had lately returned from a trip to old Granada, and, of course, were full of Saracenic scenery. Ah, congratulations on the 7 stream streak, Blake. I genuinely appreciate it. You're welcome to streak here anytime. A fifth had a funny case in Laudertown. A sixth were erudite in wines. A seventh had a strange characteristic anecdote of the private life of the Iron Duke, never printed and never before announced in any public or private company. An eighth had lately been amused in his evening, now and then, with translating a comic poem of Pulci's. He quoted for us the more amusing passages. And so the evening slipped along, the hours told not by a water clock like King Alfred's, but a wine chronometer. Meantime, the table seemed a sort of Epsom Heath, a regular ring where the decanters galloped round. For fear one decanter should not with sufficient speed reach his destination, another was sent express after him to worry him, and then a third to worry the second, and so on with a fourth and a fifth. And throughout all this, nothing loud, nothing unmannerly, nothing turbulent. I am quite sure, from the scrupulous gravity and austerity of his air, that had Socrates, the field marshal, perceived aught of indecorum in the company he served, he would have forthwith departed without giving warning. I afterward learned that, during the repast, an invalid bachelor in an adjoining chamber enjoyed his first sound, refreshing slumber in 3 long, weary weeks. It was a very perfection of quiet absorption of good living, good drinking, good feeling, and good talk. We were a band of brothers. Comfort, fraternal household comfort, was a grand trait of the affair. Also, you could plainly see that these easy-hearted men had no wives or children to give an anxious thought. Almost all of them was travellers too. The bachelors alone could travel freely, and without any twinges of their consciences touching desertion of the fireside. The thing called pain, the bugbear-style trouble, those 2 legends seemed preposterous to their bachelor imaginations. How could men of liberal sense, ripe scholarship in the world, and capacious philosophical and convivial understanding, how could they suffer themselves to be imposed upon by such monkish fables? Pain, trouble, as well talk of Catholic miracles. No such thing. Pass the sherry, sir. Pooh-pooh can't be. The port, sir, if you please. Nonsense, don't tell me so. The decanter stops with you, sir, I believe. And so it went. Not long after the cloth was drawn, Iris glanced significantly upon Socrates, who, solemnly stepping to a stand, returned with an immense convolved horn, a regular Jericho horn, mounted with polished silver, and otherwise chased and curiously enriched, not omitting 2 laugh-like goats' heads with 4 more horns, of solid silver projecting from the opposite sides of the mouth of the noble main horn. Not having heard that our host were a performer on the bugle, I was surprised to see him lift this horn from the table, as if he were about to blow it, an inspiring blast. But I was relieved from this, and set quite right, as touching the purpose of the horn, by his now inserting his thumb and forefinger into its mouth, whereupon a slight aroma was stirred up, and my nostril was greeted with the smell of some choice rapee. It were mule snuff. It went the rounds. Capital idea, this, thought I, had taken snuff about this juncture. This goodly fashion must be introduced among my countrymen at home, further ruminated I. The remarkable decorum of the 9 bachelors, a decorum not to be affected by any quantity of wine, a decorum unassailed by any degree of mirthfulness. This were again set in a forcible light, and a forcible light to me now, observing that though they took their snuff very freely, yet not a man so far violated the proprieties, or so far molested the invalid bachelor in the adjoining room, as to indulge himself in a sneeze. The snuff was snuffed silently, as if it had been some fine, innocuous powder brushed off the wings of butterflies. But fine though they be, Bachelors' dinners, like bachelors' lives, cannot endure forever. The time come for breaking up. One by one the bachelors took their hats, and two by two then, arm in arm, they descended, still conversing with the flagging of the court. Some going to their neighbouring chambers to turn over the Decameron ere retiring for the night, some to smoke a cigar, promenading in the garden on the cool riverside. Some to make for the street, call an hack and be driven snugly to their distant lodgings. I was the last lingerer. "Well," said my smiling host, "what do you think of the temple here, and the sort of life we bachelors make out to live in it?" "Sir," said I, with a burst of admiring candour, "sir, this is the very paradise of bachelors." And that's the end of the Paradise of Bachelors, which is one half of our little two-part story here. I'll have a quick drink and then give some thoughts. It's an interesting little story, and something of an odd one. Because there's not actually very much story to it, really. As it goes, it's basically just an account of a particular area and a sort of lifestyle led by certain men living there. Like, there are some new accounts. There's a little thing about the Templars and the sort of idea of these being transitioned there, but the name is clearly just from the district being the Temple district, Temple Bar. Really, the whole thing is basically just sort of describing a vibe or an energy that an area has, more than anything else. Well, you didn't say it's bad for that. Well enough, you've got to understand that in doing this, you've, how'd you say? You're sort of given a strong sense of a place. It does really immerse you in it. But other than a rather, sumptuously detailed dinner, there's not actually a lot of action that happens here. This is again one of those things that I would hesitate to call it a story, really. It's just an account. It's a little sort of anecdote. An interesting one, though. I quite like it, actually, from Melville. He's a good writer, just, he tends to get caught up on odd things, which sort of brings him down sometimes. But this is a strong one from him, I think. Not a lot to it, but very enjoyable. Which I suppose as much as you could say about the life of those bachelors, eh? I don't think there's much worth lingering on, so I shall have another quick little drink because I had a tickle in my throat there, which is alarming me, and then we'll move on. Right. The Tartarus of Maids. It lies not far from Wardelor Mountain in New England. Turning to the east, right out from among the bright farms and sunny meadows, nodding in early June with odorous grasses, you enter ascendingly among bleak hills. These gradually close in upon a dusky pass, which, from the violent Gulf Stream of air unceasingly driving between its cloven walls of haggard rock, as well as from the tradition of crazy spinsters up, having long ago stood somewhere hereabouts, is called the Mad Maid's Bellow Pipe. Winding along at the bottom of the gorge is a dangerously narrow wheel road, occupying the bed of a former torrent. Following this road to its highest point, you stand as within a Dantean gateway. From the steepness of the walls here, their strange ebony hue, and the sudden contraction of the gorge, this particular point is called the Black Notch. The ravine now expandingly descends into a great purple hopper-shaped hollow, far sunk among many Plutonian, shaggy wooded mountains. By the country people, this hollow is called the Devil's Dungeon. Sounds of torrents fall on all sides upon the ear. These rapid waters unite at last in one turbid, brick-coloured stream, boiling through a flume among enormous boulders. They call this strange-coloured torrent Blood River. Gaining a dark precipice, it wheels suddenly to the west, and makes one manic spring of 60 feet into the arms of a stunted wood of grey-haired pines, between which it thence eddies on its further way down to the invisible lowlands. Conspicuously crowning a rocky bluff high to one side, at the cataract's verge, is the ruin of an old sawmill, built in those primitive times when vast pines and hemlocks superabounded throughout the neighbouring region. The black mossed bulk of those immense, rough-hewn and spark-knotted logs, here and there tumbled all together in long abandonment and decay, or left in solitary, perilous projection over the cataract's gloomy brink. In part this rude wooden ruin not only much of the aspect of one of rough quarried stone, but also a sort of feudal Rhineland and Thornburg look, derived from the pinnacled wildness of neighbouring scenery. Not far from the bottom of the dungeon stands a large whitewashed building, relieved like some great white sepulchre against the sullen background of mountainside firs and other hardy evergreens, inaccessibly rising in grim terraces for some 2,000 feet. The building is a paper mill. Having embarked on a large scale in the seedsman's business, so extensively and broadcast, indeed, that at length my seeds were distributed through all the eastern and northern states, and even fell into the far soil of Missouri and the Carolinas, the demand for paper at my place became so great that the expenditure soon amounted to a most important item in the general account. And you'd hardly be hinted how paper comes into use with seedsmen as envelopes. These are mostly made of yellowish paper, folded square, and when filled are all but flat, and being stamped and superscribed with the nature of seeds contained, assume not a little the appearance of business letters ready for the mail. Of these small envelopes I used an incredible quantity, several hundred of thousands in a year. At the time I purchased my paper from the party for the sake of the adventure of the trip, and now resolved to cross the mountains, some 60 miles, and order my future paper at the Devil's Dungeon paper mill. The sleighing being uncommonly fine towards the end of January, and promising to hold so for no small period, in spite of the bitter cold, I started one grey Friday noon in my pung, well fitted with buffalo and wolf robes, and spending one night on the road, next noon came in sight of Waldor Mountain. The far summit fairly smoked with frost, white vapours curled up from its white wooded top, as from a chimney. The intense congelation made the whole country look like one petrification. The steel shoes of my pung crunched and gritted over these vitreous chippy snow, as if it had been broken glass. The forest here and there skirting the route, feeling the same all-stiffening influence, their innermost fibres penetrated with the cold, strangely groaned, not in the swaying branches merely, but likewise in the vertical trunk, as the fitful gust remorselessly swept through them. Brittle with excessive frost, many colossal tough grey maples, snapped in twain like pipe stems, cumbered the unfeeling earth. Flaked all over with frozen sweat, white as a milky ram, his nostrils at each breath sending forth two horn-shaped shoots of heated respiration, Black, my good horse, was 6 years old, started at a sudden turn where, right across the track, not 10 minutes fallen, an old distorted hemlock lay, darkly undulatory as an anaconda. Gaining the bellow pipe, the violent blast, dead from beyond, all but shoved my backpack pung uphill. A gust shrieked through the shiver of the pass, as if laden with lost spirits bound to the unhappy world. Ere gaining the summit, Black, my horse, as if exasperated by the cutting wind, slung out with his strong indlers, tore the lot pung straight uphill, and sweeping brazenly through the narrow notch, spread downwards madly past the ruined sawmill, into the Devil's Dungeon. Horse and cataract rushed together. With might and main, quitting my seat and robes, and standing backwards, with one foot braced against the dashboard, I rasped and churned the bit, and stopped in just in time to avoid collisions, at turn, with a bleak nozzle of a rock, crouching like a lion in the way, with a bleak nozzle of rock, crouching like a lion in the way, crouching like a lion in the way, a roadside rock. At first I could not discover the paper mill. The old holler gleamed with the white, except here and there, where a pinnacle of granite showed on one windswept angle bare. The mountain stood pinned in shrouds, a pass of alpine corpses. Hey Nazca, good to have you. We've finished the Paradise of Bachelors, which was just an account of a place in London, and we're currently on a Tartarus of Mage, which has led us to describe a paper mill in a particularly dismal part of New England, to which our intrepid narrator is currently venturing on a horse-drawn sleigh. The mountain stood pinned in shrouds, a pass of alpine corpses where stands the mill. Suddenly a whir and humming sound broke upon my ears. I looked, and there, like an arrested avalanche, lay the large whitewash factory. It was subordinately surrounded by a cluster of other and smaller buildings, some of which, from their cheap blank air, great length, gregarious windows, and comfortless expressions, no doubt were boarding houses of the operatives. A snow-white hamlet amidst the snow. Various rude, irregular squares and courts resulting from the somewhat picturesque clusterings of these buildings, owing to the broken, rocky nature of the ground which forbade all methods in their relative arrangement. Several narrow lanes and alleys, too, partly blocked with snow fallen from the roof, cut the hamlet in all directions. I should really do something about that little sound alert on OBS. I need to figure out how that works. Yeah. When turning from the travelled highway, jingling with bells and numerous farmers who, availing themselves of fine sleighing, were dragging their wood to market, and frequently diversified with swift cutters dashing from in the wind with the scattered villages. When I say, turning from that bustling main road, I by degrees wound into the mad maid's bellow pipe, and saw the grim black notch beyond, and something latent, as well as something obvious in the time and scene, strangely brought back to my mind my first sight, a dark and grimy temple bar. When Black, my horse, went darting through the notch, perilously grazing its rocky wall, I remembered being in a runway London omnibus, which in much of the same short style, though by no means at equal rate, dashed through the ancient arch of Rem. Though the two objects did by no means completely correspond, yet this partial inadequacy but served to tinge the similitude not less with the vividness than the disorder of a dream. So that when, upon reining up at the protruding rocks, I at last caught sight of the quaint groupings of factory buildings, and with the travelled highway of the notch beyond, found myself all alone, silently and privately stealing through the deep cloven passages of the sequestered spot, and saw the long gabled main factory edifice with a rude tower, priced in heavy boxes, at one end, standing among its crowded outbuildings and boarding houses, as the temple church amidst the surrounding offices and dormitories. And when the marvellous retirement of this mysterious mountain nook fastened with its old spell upon me, then what memory lacked, all tribute your imagination furnished, and I said to myself, this is the very counterpart of the paradise of Bachelors, snowed upon and frost painted to a sepulchre. Dismounting, and warily picking my way down the dangerous declivity, horse and man both sliding now and then upon the icy ledges, at length I drove, or the blast drove me, in the largest square, before one side of the main edifice. Piercingly and shrilly, the shorted blast blew by the corner, and redly and demoniacally poured Blood River at one side. A long wood pile and many scores of cores, all glittering in nail of crushed ice, stood crosswise in the square. A row of horse posts, their north sides plastered with adhesive snow, flanked the factory wall. The bleak frost packed and paved the square as with some ringing metal. The inverted similitude recurred. The sweet tranquil temple garden with the Thames bordering its green beds, strangely meditated I. But where are the gay bachelors? Then, as I and my horse stood shivering in the wind spray, a girl ran from a neighbouring dormitory door, and, throwing her thin apron over her head, made for the opposite building. One moment, girl. Is there no shed hereabouts which I may drive into? Pausing, she turned upon me, her face pale with work and blue with cold, an eye supernatural with unrelated misery. Nay, thought I mistake you. Go on, I want nothing. Leading my horse close to the door from which she had come, I knocked. Another pale, blue girl appeared, shivering in a doorway, as, to prevent the blast, she jealously held the door ajar. Nay, I mistake again. In God's name, shut the door. Hold, is there no man about? At that moment, a dark complexioned, well-wrapped personage passed, making for the factory door, and spying him coming, the girl rapidly closed the other one. Is there no horse shed here, sir? Yonder to the woodshed, he replied, and disappeared inside the factory. With much ado I managed to wedge an horse and pung between the scattered piles of wood, all sawn and split. Then, blanketing my horse, and piling my buffalo on the blanket's top, and tucking in its edges well around the beast band and breeching, so that the wind might not strip him bare, I tied him fast and ran lamely for the factory door, stiff with frost, encumbered with my driver's dreadnought. Immediately I found myself standing in a spacious place, intolerably lighted by long rows of windows, focused inward the snowy scene without. At rows of blank-looking counters sat rows of blank-looking girls, with blank white folders in their blank hands, all blankly folding blank paper. In one corner stood some huge frame of ponderous iron, with a vertical thing like a piston periodically rising and falling upon an heavy wooden block. Before it, its tame minister, stood a tall girl, feeding the iron animal with half quires of rose-hued notepaper, which, at every downward dab of the piston-like machine, received in the corner the impress of a wreath of roses. I looked from the rosy paper to the pallid cheek, but said nothing. Seated before a long apparatus, strung with long, slender strings like any harp, another girl was feeding it with foolscap sheets which, so soon as they curiously travelled from her on the cords, were withdrawn at the opposite end of the machine by a second girl. They come to the first girl blank, and they went to the second girl ruled. I looked upon the first girl's brow, and saw it were young and fair. I looked upon the second girl's brow, and saw it were ruled and wrinkled. Then, as I still looked, the two, for some small variety to the monotony, changed places, and where had stood the young fair brow, now stood the ruled and wrinkled one. Perched high upon a narrow platform, and still higher upon a high stool crowning it, sat another figure, serving some other iron animal, while below the platform sat our mate in some sort of reciprocal attendance. Not a syllable were breathed, nothing were heard but the slow, steady overruling hum of the iron animals. The human voice was banished from the spot. Machinery, that vaunted slave of humanity, here stood menially served by human beings, who served mutely and cringingly as the slave serves a sultan. The girls did not so much seem accessory wheels to the general machinery as mere cogs to the wheels. All this scene around me were instantaneously taken in at one sweeping glance, even before I had proceeded to unwind the heavy tippet from around my neck. But as soon as this fell from me, the dark-complexioned man, standing close by, raised a sudden cry, and seizing my arm, dragged me out into the open air, and without pausing for a word, instantly caught up some congealed snow and began rubbing both my cheeks. "Two white spots like the whites of your eyes," he said. "Man, your cheeks are frozen." "That may well be," I muttered. "'Tis some wonder the frost of the devil's dungeon strikes them so deep. Rub away." Soon an horrible tear and pain caught at my reviving cheeks. Two gaunt bloodhounds, one on each side, seemed mumbling in them. I seemed Actaeon. Presently, when all was over, I re-entered the factory, made known my business, concluded it satisfactorily, and then begged to be conducted through the place to view it. "Cupid is the boy for that," said the dark-complexioned man. "Cupid!" And by this old fancy name-calling, a dimpled, red-cheeked, spirited-looking, forward little fellow, who were rather imprudently, I thought, gliding about among the passive-looking girls, like a goldfish through hueless waves, yet doing nothing in particular that I could see, the man bade him lead the stranger through the edifice. "Come first and see the water-wheel," said this lively lad with the air of boyish, brisk importance. Quitting the folding room, we crossed some damp, cold boards, and stood beneath a great wet shed, incessantly showering with foam, like the green barnacled bow of some East Indiaman in a gale. Round and round here went the enormous revolutions of the dark, colossal water-wheel, grim with its one immutable purpose. "This sets our whole machinery a-going, sir, and every part of all these buildings where the girls work and all." I looked, and saw that the turbid waves of waters of Blood River had not changed their hue by coming under the use of man. "You make only blank paper? No printing of any sort, I suppose? All blank paper, don't you?" "Certainly. What else should a paper factory make?" The lad here looked at me as if suspicious of my common sense. "Ah, to be sure," I said, confused and stammering. It only struck me as so strange that red waters should turn out pale paper. He took me up a wet and rickety stair to a great light room, furnished with no visible thing but rude, manger-like receptacles, running all round its sides, and up to these mangers, like so many more mares altered to the rack, stood rows of girls, Before each were vertically thrust up a long glittering salve, immovably fixed at bottom with a manger edge. The curve of the salve, and its having no snaft to it, made it look exactly like a sword. Gonna pause here because we're about to enter an ad break in 4 seconds. So we'll do my little bit of ad break commentary, but first I will have a little drink. This is important to keep drinking. So let's do our little bit of commentary then, shall we? So there's a few things to this story that sort of stand out to me immediately. Obviously there's the scenery, which is cold and barren, and all the horrible names. The Stygian Pit, Blood River, all this. Makes for a very grim sounding place. But the thing that makes it, and the thing that makes these two stories so compatible, is the contrast between them. At least to my mind. The one you have in the former is a paradise of bachelors, the paradise of men living in lives of leisure, free from hard labour and work of the sweat of their brow, living the highest sort of life, comfortable and genteel and lovely. And here on the other hand, you have, in contrast, a Tartarus of Maine, the most miserable place in the world, with people forced to work. Now, them all being women does add a certain element to this, which I think probably is more shock factor than anything. I know a lot of women did do sort of work like this, although I don't know how. I don't know about paper factories as a sort of source of female labour. I know a lot of textiles was handled by women back in the day. But paper factories is a new one to me. And it does seem the sort of industry that might be within that sort of remit. But yeah, it adds a sort of extra element of juxtaposition. These men living their high lives of ease, and these women living the hard life of labour. Which, in some ways, also an inversion of the standard sort of idea of the social order, but also just, it's a pretty clear contrast between the ease of leisure and sort of intellectual pursuit, and the misery and labour of hard work. It's odd, really. Generally, this sort of story makes me dislike the people who are in the ease of their lives more. But in this case, it doesn't really strike me that way. It's bad that these women are suffering and they have to work so hard, and that the conditions are going to be so apparently miserable. But the first part isn't an indictment of these people living the high life. It's the opposite, really. Generally in this story, you have rich people who are living the high life at the expense of poor people, and poor people living miserable lives that are contrasted as sort of virtuous but sad. But it's not in this case. I like it because it's very clear that the people in the first story, the Paradise of Bachelors, are living good lives. They're given leisure and they're making good use of it. They're intellectual, they're charming, they're polite and they're kind. They inquire after things and they learn things. The ease that they have isn't negative. The only negative here is that it is denied to others. It's an interesting little take on the sort of idea. And it's one that I quite agree with, really. People given leisure and freedom are at their best. And they deserve it. But sadly, it's very rare that people are given that sort of thing. As I'm sure we all can attest. But we're back from the outbreak now, so I'll have another quick swallow of water just to make sure my throat is in best health, and then we'll press on. I normally have one of my lozenges before these. I've been doing that lately because they're good for it. Preparing the throat, but I forgot today and I'm feeling the difference. The curve of the salve, and it's having no snatch to it, made it look exactly like a sword. To and fro, across the sharp edge, the girls forever dragged long strips of rags, washed white, picked from baskets at one side, thus ripping asunder every seam and converting the tatters almost into lint. The air swam with a fine, poisonous particles, which from all sides darted subtly, as motes and sunbeams, into the lungs. "This is the rag room," coughed the boy. "You find it rather stifling here," coughed I in answer. "But the girls don't cough." "Oh, they're used to it." "Where do you get such an host of rags?" Picking up an handful from a basket. Some from the country round about, some from far oversea, Leghorn and London." "It's not unlikely then," murmured I, Among these heaps of rags there may be some old shirts gathered from the dormitories of the paradise of bachelors, but the buttons are all dropped off. Pray, my lad, you ever find any bachelors' buttons hereabouts? None grow in this part of the country. The Devil's Dungeon is no place for flowers. Oh, you mean the flowers called the bachelors' buttons? And was that not what you asked about? Or did you mean the gold bosom buttons of our boss, old Back, as our whispering girls all call him? The man I saw below, is he a bachelor? Is he a bachelor, is he? Oh yes, he's a batch. The edges of those swords, they turned outward from the girls, if I see it right, but the rags and fingers fly, so I cannot distinctly see. Turned outward? Yes, I murmured to myself. I see it now. Turned outward, and each erected sword is so born, edge outward before each goal. If my reading fails me, not just so of old, condemned state prisoners went from the halls of judgment to their doom, an officer before bearing a sword, its edge turned outward in significance of their fatal sentence. So through consumptive pallors of this blank raggy life go these white girls to death. Those sides look very sharp. Again turned towards the boy. Yes, they have to keep them so. Look. At a moment, two of the girls, dropping their rags, plied each a whetstone up and down the sword blade. My unaccustomed blood curdled at the sharp shriek of the tormented steel. Their own executioners, themselves whetting the very swords that slayed them, meditated I. What makes those girls so sheep white, my lad? Why, with a roguish twinkle, pure ignorant drollery, not knowing artlessness, I suppose the handling of such white bits of sheets all the time makes them so sheety. Let's leave the rag room now, my lad. More tragical and more inscrutably mysterious than any mystic sight, humans or machines throughout the factory with a strange innocence, cruel-heartedness in this usage-hardened boy. And now, said he cheerily, I suppose you want to see our great machine, which cost us $12,000 only last autumn. That's the machine that makes the paper too. This way, sir. Following him, I crossed a large, bespattered place with two great round vats in it, full of white, wet, woolly-looking stuff, not unlike the albuminous part of an egg, soft-boiled. Albuminous part of an egg, soft-boiled. There, said Cupid, tapping the vats carelessly. These are the first beginnings of the paper. This is white pulp, you see. Look how it swims, bubbling round and round, moved by the paddle here. From hence it pours forth both vats into that one common channel, yonder, and so goes, mixed up and leisurely, to the great machine. And now for that. He led me into a room, stifling with a strange, blood-like, abdominal heat, as if here, true enough, were finally being developed the germinous particles lately seen. Before me, rolled out like some long Eastern manuscript, lay stretched one continuous length of iron framework, multitudinous and mystical, with all sorts of rollers, wheels, and cylinders, and slowly measured and unceasing motion. Here first comes the pulp now, said Cupid, pointing to the nighest end of the machine. See? First it pours it out and spreads itself upon this wide sloping board. And then look, it slides thin and quivering beneath the first roller there. Follow on now and see it as it slides from under that to the next cylinder. There, see how it's become just a very little less pulpy now. One step more and it grows still more to some slight consistency. Still another cylinder, and it is so knitted, though as yet mere dragonfly wings, that it forms an air bridge here, like a suspended cobweb between two more separated rollers, flowing over the last one and under again, and doubling about there out of sight for a minute among all those mixed cylinders you indistinctly see. It reappears here, looking now at last a little less like pulp and more like paper, but still quite delicate and defective yet awhile. But a little further onward, sir, if you please. Here now, at this further point, it puts on something of a real look, as if it might turn out to be something you might possibly handle in the end. But it's not yet done, sir. Good way to travel yet, and plenty more cylinders must roll it. Bless my soul, said I, amazed at the elongation, interminable convolutions and deliberate slowness of the machine. Must take a long time for the pulp to pass from end to end, and come out paper. Oh, not so long, smiled the precocious lad with a superior and patronising air. Only 9 minutes. But look, you may try it for yourself. Have you a bit of paper? There is a bit on the floor. Now mark that with any word you please, and let me dab it here, and we'll see how long before it comes out the other end. Let me see, said I, taking out my pencil. Come on, mark it with your name. Bidding me take out my watch, Cupid adroitly dropped the inscribed slip on the exposed part of the incipient mass. Instantly my eye marked the second hand on my dial plate. Slowly I followed the slip, inch by inch, sometimes pausing for a full half minute as it disappeared beneath inscrutable groups of the lower cylinders. But only gradually they would merge again, and so on and on and on, inch by inch, now in open sight, sliding along like a freckle on a quivering sheet, and then again wholly vanished, and so on and so on, inch by inch all the time, the main sheet growing more and more fine with the firmness, when suddenly I saw a sort of paper fall, not wholly unlike a waterfall. A scissory sound smote my ear, as of some cord being snapped, and down dropped an unfolded sheet of perfect foolscap, with my Cupid half faded out on it, and still moist and warm. My travels were at an end, for here were the end of the machine. "Well, how long was it?" said Cupid. "9 minutes to a second," replied I, watch in hand. "I told you so." For a moment a curious emotion filled me, one not wholly unlike that which one might experience at the fulfilment of some mysterious prophecy. But how absurd, thought I again. The thing is merely a machine, the essence of which is unvarying punctuality and precision. Previously absorbed by the wheels and cylinders, my attention was now directed to a sad-looking woman standing by. "That's rather an elderly person, so silently tending the machine end here. She would not seem wholly used to it either." "Oh," only whispered Cupid through the din. "She only came last week. She were a nurse formerly, but the business is poor in these parts, and she's left it. But look at the paper she's piling there." Ah, foolscap, and in the piles of moist, warm sheets, which continually were being delivered into the woman's waiting hands. "Don't you turn out anything that's good foolscap of this machine?" "Oh, sometimes, but not often. We turn out finer work. Cream-laid and royal sheets, we call them. But foolscap being chief in demand, we turn out foolscap most." It was very curious. Looking at that blank paper, continually dropping, my mind ran on in wonderings of those strange uses to which the 1,000 sheets eventually would be put. All sorts of writing would be written on these now vacant things: sermons, laws, briefs, physicians' prescriptions, love letters, marriage certificates, bills of divorce, registers of birth, death warrants, and so on without end. Then, recurring back to them as they lay blank, I could not but bethink me of that celebrated comparison of John Locke, who, in demonstration of his theory that man has no innate ideas compared to the human mind at birth to a sheet of blank paper, something destined to be scribbled on, but what sort of character no soul might tell. Pacing slowly to and fro along the involved machine, still humming with its play, I was struck as well by the inevitability of the involvement power in all its motions. "Is that thin cobweb there?" said I, pointing to the sheet in its more imperfect stage. "Does that never tear or break? It's marvellous fragile, and yet this machine it passes through is so mighty. It's never known to tear an hair's point. Does it never stop, get clogged?" "No, it must go. The machinery makes it go just so, that very way, at the very pace you there plainly see it go. The pole can't help going." Something of awe now stole over me as I gazed upon the inflexible iron animal. Always more or less machinery of this ponderous, elaborate sort strikes, in some moods, strange dread into the human heart, as some living, panting behemoth might. But what made this thing I saw so specially terrible to me was the metallic necessity, the unbudging fatality which governed it. Though here and there I could not follow this thin, gauzy veil of pulp into the course of its more mysterious, or entirely invisible advance, yet it was indubitable that, at those points where it eluded me, it still marched on in unvarying docility with the autocratic cunning of the machine. A fascination fastened on me. I stood spellbound and wondering in my soul. Before my eyes, there, passing in a slow procession along the wheeling cylinders, I seemed to see, glued to the pallid incipients of the pulp, yet more pallid faces of all the pallid girls I had eyed this heavy day. Slowly, mournfully, beseechingly, yet unresistingly, they gleamed along, their agony dimly outlined in the imperfect paper, like the print of the tormented face on the handkerchief of St. Veronica. "Hello, the heat of the room is too much for you," cried Cupid, staring at me. "No, I'm rather chill, if anything." "Come out, sir, out. With a protected air of a careful father, a precocious lad hurried me outside. In a few moments, feeling revived a little, I went into the folding room, the first room I had entered, and where the desk for the transacting business stood, surrounded by the blank counters and blank girls engaged at them. "You there has led me a strange thought," said I to the dark-complexioned man before mentioned, whom I had ere this discovered not only to be an old bachelor, but also the principal proprietor. "Yours is a most wonderful factory. Your great machine is a miracle of inscrutable intricacy." "Yes, all of us think it so. But we don't have many. We're in a very out-of-the-way corner here. The inhabitants too. Most of our girls come from far-off villages." "The girls," echoed I, glancing round at their silent forms. "Why is it, sir, that in most factories female operatives, of whatever age, are indiscriminately called girls, never women?" "Oh, as to that, why, I suppose the fact that they're being generally unmarried, that's the reason, I should think. It never struck me before. For our factory here, we will not have married women. They're apt to be off and on too much. We want none but steady workers, 12 hours of the day, day after day, through the 365 days except on Sundays, Thanksgiving and fast days. That's our rule. And so, having no married women, what females we are rightly enough called girls." "And these are all maids," said I. While some paying homage to those their pale virginity made me involuntarily bow. "All maids." Again the strange emotion filled me. Your cheeks look whitish yet, sir," said the man, gazing at me narrowly. "You must be careful going home. Do they pain you at all now? It's a bad sign if they do." "No doubt, sir," answered I. "When once I got out of the devil's dungeon, I shall feel them mending." "Ah, yes, the winter air in valleys or gorges or any sunken place is far colder and more bitter than elsewhere. You would hardly believe it now, but it's colder here than at the top of Waldor Mountain." "I dare say it is, sir. But time presses me. I must depart." With that, remuffling myself in dreadnought and tippet, thrusting my hands into my huge sealskin mittens, I sallied out into the nipping air and found poor Black, my horse, all cringing and doubled up with the cold. Soon, wrapped in the furs and meditations, I ascended from the devil's dungeon. At the Black Notch I paused, and once more bethought me of Temple Bar. Then, shooting through the pass, all alone with inscrutable nature, I exclaimed, "O paradise of bachelors, and O Tartarus of maids!" And that's the end of the piece. Let's get somewhere a little more comfortable and do our little post-chat, shall we? I'll have a swallow of water first, try not to be good. So, I think I stand by most of what I said in my little interlude break during the ad break, which I know sometimes people don't get. But yeah, mostly this seems to be a sort of comparison piece between the idle leisure and sort of freedom experienced by those wealthy bachelors and the sort of abject misery of the working women in the paper mill. The sort of clear distinction being that one life is miserable and one fine, but again with the sort of the exception of it not being a negative thing that the bachelors are living good lives, only that it would be a good thing if the women who were working in the paper mill would live similar lives, have similar freedoms and opportunities. And I stand by that point. But there's another aspect to it that sort of with the introduction of the machine itself, the paper making machine, you have this element added of industrial misery, the misery of productive machinery, of automated suffering, and the need of paper, which, I mean, the narrator himself is who needs the paper, and the needs of the sort of unending machine, the unending desire for this paper, is what condemns these women to an hard life. And for all that he talks about, death certificates and prescriptions and love letters and all these important things, it comes across like it's an excuse to himself. Because he's going to be sending out packets of seeds and paper, and he could send them out in bags or in another way. in some ways he's responsible for the suffering he sees there. I don't think he ever makes that connection in and of himself. I don't even know if Melville really makes the connection. As of course, assuming this is an actual autobiographical tale, in which case maybe it's true that he doesn't. No, he should. It's strange, really. There's, I mean, another aspect to it, the sort of the girls thing, the maids, the fact that all working women are unmarried because you can't have because a woman who's married and has kids and is likely to be living a domestic life is an unreliable worker. Which, I mean, it was, well, it was and still is sort of thing, you know. You have the domestic needs clashing with the needs of labour, which I don't think was relevant at the time. Hey, Wild, we're just about done here, but I appreciate you stopping by. Yeah, like I say, yeah, the idea of the domestic needs clashing with the needs of labour wouldn't have been as much of a theme at the time, but more and more nowadays it's becoming an increasingly required theme. The fact that you need, in a two-person household, both people need to be working means there's less time given to domestic labour. It's a sort of thing that slips to the side, and it's made possible because we have machines now that do a lot of that domestic labour and make it easier. Washing machines and dishwashers and all sorts of little contrivances, vacuum cleaners, such and such, that mean you can make it done in less time. But things slip to the wayside. I mean, think of all the times you've never had the time to cook because you were too busy. All the people who do that every day. People who don't even have kitchens in their houses anymore. The machine grinds on, and it grinds people. I don't think that's the intended message of this piece, but time changes things, changes perspectives. I'm not even sure that my idea about profitable leisure is the correct interpretation of this. It might literally just be an account of two odd things, but it rings true to me. People given wealth and ease and leisure become their best selves, and people given labour and hardship and suffering become their worst selves. And it is righteous that people become the former, and wrong that they become the latter. Infernal. Tartarian. There we are. For a little link. I think that's about all I have to say, really. I'm almost tempted to try and do a little bit more of this, but I don't actually have anything of the sort of right length to sort of fill another half hour or so, which is what I'd want to do. I also should probably be giving my voice a bit of rest today, given that I've got I plan to do a collab and probably another stream afterwards tomorrow. So you know, yeah. I guess that's what I should say. Once again, going to be collaborating tomorrow with SkitterSkreetch crew, talking a little bit about Magic the Gathering, specifically the new Marvel set that they're releasing and the spoilers for it. And we're going over those. And the plan is that I'm going to be putting together a deck list, which, you know, I don't have a ton of experience with Magic, whereas they do, so it should be a good time. I won't be streaming it over here; it will be over on their channel if you want to watch it. And probably I'll stream afterwards, but I don't know for sure because I don't know how long it's going to run. So things might be a bit up in the air time-wise. But yeah. I think that's all I have to say, really, other than the read. Thank you as always to all of you for showing up here. Those of you who've stopped by and said hello, I appreciate it. Abe especially for getting first, I appreciate it. Anyone who's just been lurking, I appreciate it. I appreciate all of you very, very much. You're all wonderful people and you deserve the best and happiest, and I hope that the rest of your day, whatever time it is for you, is lovely. You're very welcome, Master, as is everyone else. Really got to adjust that little tinkle. I put the volume change down around a bit because of the it's got the circulation there, and I've got to address that. But yeah. Thank you all of you for being here. I genuinely appreciate it. You're all very lovely people, and yeah. All right. I'm always like, yeah. I don't have people here. There's no point in me reading out. But then I'm like, oh yeah, there are people here. I should see if anyone's alive. Oh, Scribble's still alive. Yeah, that's probably who I should raid into since we're. So yeah, that's enjoyable. Very welcome, Happy. Going to raid into Scribble, who is a moth. Oh, it's no problem. No problem at all, Wild. Genuinely. I don't have a good format for chatting. I always appreciate your luck. Yeah. I'll send this over to there. Yeah. I appreciate all of you. You're all wonderful people. I'm gonna let you duck out now because about done. But I do genuinely appreciate all of you for being here. And as always, ta-ra.